Hello again, lovely people. Welcome back to Jacobism. Today, I'm going to share with you, and I fucking mean this, why my parents' death was the best thing that ever happened to me. In preparing for this video, I wrote a long list of benefits but could barely list a downside. Before we get into them, I'm going to give you some context first. My dad died on holiday in 2006 when I was 6, and my mother died in 2014 from motor neuron disease when I was 15. Quite clearly from the title, I have made peace as to why and how they left. And so I'm going to share with you a joke that was told to me not long after my mum died. Losing one parent, that's unfortunate. But losing two, well, that's just careless. And I laughed my tits off. And so, lovely people, in no particular order, let's do this. Now, in our first point, I'm going to share with you perhaps one of the best things that resulted from the loss of my parents, which was responsibility and discipline. Whether I liked it or not, I was involuntarily thrown hard and fast into the deep end of responsibility. And despite it seeming otherwise, it was a beautiful thing. I have a separate video on this, so I'm not going to go into too much detail about the general benefits of responsibility, but given the context of losing my parents, I was thrown into an unforgivable environment with the utmost accountability. If I fucked up, I couldn't look around and blame it on someone else. The safety net was gone, so not only did I have to dust myself off, but I also better not fall too fucking hard. And I will say that I hit the motherfucking deck on a few occasions, and it almost changed my life forever. This unrelenting environment of independence meant that I had the freedom to do what I wanted, when I wanted. And I remember from the ages of about 14 to almost 16, I would go to illegal squat raves and dance around to the late hours of the morning with other fellow strange degenerates, and no one would text to check up on me or wonder where I was. I would come home to a free yard and sleep the rest of the day off. You see, what I learned from having an abundance of freedom, thinking this is what I wanted, was that it created an environment to do a massive U-turn, but only after being burned a few times. Despite all the freedom that I had no control over myself because I was governed by the whims of how I felt and had no ability to get the things that needed doing done, such as revising for my GCSEs or A-levels. It's quite ironic because it's like when you tell a kid not to do something and it only makes them want to do it more. I had all the freedom a pubescent shit could ever want, but I soon realised that I needed structure and discipline. Now in this second point, I'm going to share with you the resilience that I learned as a result. Not long ago, I came across an interview of Martin Lewis, the sexy and Jewish money-saving expert, as if that wasn't a coincidence, and he was talking about how the loss of his mother impacted him. He said, clearly not ever having really gotten over the loss, that he sadly attributes a lot of his career success to the loss of his mother. He said that he became brittle, and there's something within a bereaved child that nothing can hurt them like they have already been hurt, and therefore they can push harder, for longer, and be stronger, and not care what others think about them. When I watched this interview a few years ago, I was a sobbing mess because he's exactly right. I am quite brittle, but I am also a bullish motherfucker because it gave me a Teflon coating in the perspective of losing my parents, where I am unfucking touchable. Further to this, if you haven't gathered already, I quite like money. How do you make lots of it? Typically business. And so a heightened resilience to risk, although some of my friends might describe it as delusional confidence, and a love of everything business and finance, I have found to be a well-balanced recipe for the future betterment of my finances. Now in this third point, I'm going to share with you some of the realities of the world that I learned. I learned that life isn't fair. It taught me that nobody gives a shit about you, your dreams, nor how you feel. However unfair I thought things were, the world kept on spinning, and despite wanting to curl up in a ball and shy away from it all, I either had to crack on or stop stealing oxygen. Instead of saying, why did all this have to happen to me when I knew some cunty little bitches that were far more deserving, I actually asked myself, why not me? Who am I to be spared from life's harshities? I'm not special. I then learned that the world and life doesn't give a fuck about you. It doesn't care how amazing and handsome you think you are, your age, your skin colour, or what you've been through. Life, if it chooses to, will come kick you in the fucking teeth and leave you for dead when you need it the least. Suffering, in whatever form it takes, is a good thing for people. When you go through great suffering, you learn what truly matters and what doesn't. None of that socially constructed nonsense. And therefore, at the core of our human nature, our society is made up of self-interested individuals, not a collective of cooperative individuals who all look out for one another. When, not if, you suffer, you will have no will but the will that says to you to hold on, to ride out the fucking storm, and you will not care for anything but your survival. You will care about you and you alone. And that is the reality of human nature. When life gets extreme, such as the experience of great suffering, it becomes life's great equalizer, because suffering doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care whether you're black, white, rich, poor, gay, straight, or disabled. As lovely as an idea it might seem, no one is entitled to a life free from deprivation, tragedy, or discrimination, despite the handicaps you think you have and deserve a break for. The world owes you nothing, and you owe it everything. Therefore, once you overcome the suffering, you will be strong and confident because it was you alone that made it through the adversity and lived to tell the tale. Given all these remarks that seem contrary to the commonly held beliefs about losing someone, especially a parent or two, I'm going to share with you my philosophy, Jacobism, which helps me make sense of such objective tragedies. Despite being a firm believer in science and all things logical and rational, I do believe there to be a supernatural component to the world. I'm not talking star signs or men in the sky, but something in which, though this is incredibly vague, coincidences and occurrences that seem out of the realm of scientific explanation occur. Although I am quite agnostic, lazy in my beliefs, and take the view that they won't be figured out in my lifetime and therefore not worth my finite amount of energy. That being said, my reasoning is that I do believe in a certain degree of fate and a lack of free will. I believe in freedom of choice, but not freedom of action. You can choose to go to the supermarket, but you can't choose whether you get run over on the way there. As such, I believe we have a predetermined timeline in which there is almost a set date when you're going to expire, and despite the actions that you might take, whether that's to live a healthy lifestyle or shelter yourself from danger, these were always the decisions that you were going to make, and therefore you have no real control over when death taps you on the shoulder. Given all this reasoning, I ask myself in the pits of despair, if my parents and myself had no control over their respective use-by dates, what use is there in wishing a reality of if-onlys and could-have-beens when that was never going to be the case? And this is when I unknowingly began practicing Stoicism, amor fati. So in this fifth point, we're going to discuss the meaning of life. When I was in those deep, dark pits, I said to myself, so if I have fuck all control, and all I am assured is misery and no guarantee of happiness, how on earth do I make sense of my existence? Am I just here to suffer? If I didn't find the solution, time and time again, my very logical and rational brain thought, well, I might as well just pop my clogs. And thank God I did find it, because otherwise I wouldn't be here talking to you today. The solution in part was to appreciate the time that I did get to spend with them. It was an utter privilege to have, frankly, two exceptional people grace my life for as long as they did. The other part of the solution was to find value in living from day to day. I often say that it is an absolute privilege to be able to spaghetti my arms in the air and make ghost noises. More seriously though, I'm referring to the 7 life processes analogy of Mrs. Gren, but I added a D and an S on the end, and it goes MRSGRENDS. Let me show you. And so the M stands for movement, the R respiration, the S sex, the G growth, R reproduction, E excretion, N nutrition, D death, and S socializing. Now I'm not going to go through them all, but I'll leave it to your imagination to how I find value in these 7 life processes. But what about the death part? Well, I included death because it gives the context to all other life processes, as it is death and its finite nature which gives everything its value and excitement. If there was no end to all this, why would you care for anything? The other side of my experience of bereavement, which has taught me the meaning of life, was that it showed me what matters and what doesn't. I am a typically laid back, cool, calm and collected kind of guy. As a part of that, things just don't bother me. I know that 99% of the things that I will do is totally meaningless and utterly unimportant, and when compared to the grand scheme of things, does not matter. I will die one day, and whether I passed those exams, made all that money, or got that girl, I will not give a single solitary fuck. Is it the end of the world? No. Losing your parents isn't far off, but even that isn't. So in this sixth point, I'm going to share with you some of the life skills that I learned as a result. Though all the points and arguments that I make in this video are more or less life skills, I'm going to drill a bit deeper. The first and arguably most important skill that I learned was being alone. Now again, I have a video on the general benefits of being alone and learning to be is a good thing. Go watch it. So I'm only going to explain the relevance in this video given the context of my bereavement. I realised, upon the loss of my parents, that I was up in this bitch on my own and no one was going to come and save or rescue me. Knowing that I was now alone was unbelievably liberating. Everything in my life, whether it went well or not, was the result of my actions, and I have and had the power to change it. The second skill was an extreme level of self-awareness resulting from introspection, getting to know thyself. All the ideas that I have and will talk about are the result of years of pondering, deducing, theorizing, and nonsense or not, had I not lost my parents and being the person I am, I don't think I would have felt any need to come to any meaningful conclusions on how to do this life thing. The level of introspection that I think is just naturally occurring for me resulted in, which is what I'm sharing with you today, the tools in order to be able to deal with grief. The next life skill I acquired was an ability to solve problems. I was 15 and was met with the most existential crisis that I think most people will ever come across in their entire lives. How do I not only make sense of this world of suffering and find a sustainable solution going forward, but crucially, how do I find happiness in my existence? Frankly, my problem-solving skills are world-class. It gave me an even more level-headed and laid-back attitude than I already possessed. The next skill is an incredible ability to empathize, which ultimately made me a nicer person. Whether it's to do with the loss of somebody or they're having a bad day, suffering is relative and I am now better equipped to help those around me. You gain a heightened awareness of your mortality and the finiteness of everything, which makes you more appreciative and better able to have deeper love for people. The next skill is maturity. By age 15, I had lost the only people I could be sure loved me, signalling the end of my childhood. Now this isn't even showing off, but I put most adults to shame with my maturity and comprehension of life. Time and time again, I have shown that I can stand on my own 2 feet. Another skill it taught me was stoicism. The experience of losing my parents taught me that there are things within your control and things that aren't in your control. I could whinge about it and say they ruined my life, but I can't change the facts. And there does come a day where they no longer ruined my life, but I let them ruin it. I didn't know until a few years later that all along I'd been unknowingly practicing stoicism. The philosophy, coupled with the experience, framed the perspective of what matters and what doesn't. So long as it doesn't kill me, it's fine. And last but not least, courage. There were days where I didn't want to get out of bed and face the world, but I put on a brave face and pretended that things were all right. There is courage in just living. Eventually though, I snowballed this attribute into varying things to make me the beast that I am today. And frankly, I don't know if it's justified or I'm verging on deranged narcissism, but considering all the things I've been through, including the things that I will never tell you, I don't think there's much that I can't do. Now in this 7th point, I'm going to share with you some of the miscellaneous benefits to losing your parents. Now, top of the list has to be, with all the internet donuts talking about main character vibes, I am basically a combination of Bruce Wayne and James Bond. I mean, come on, is there a better hero's origin story than being orphaned? But Jacob, what about Harry Potter? Harry Potter is a total dweeb. I mean, come on, is there a better hero's origin story than being orphaned? And I know what you're going to say, Jacob, what about Harry Potter? Harry Potter is a total dweeb who pisses around with magic twigs, and despite the number of World War I books I read, that could never be me. Next on the list has to be, since I'm incredibly tight with my money, Jewish, I have now 2 less birthdays, nor Mother or Father's Day to be concerned with buying presents for, and therefore have had a massive reduction in expenditure. I will add though that I receive virtually no presents on Christmas or birthdays, but it swings and roundabouts. Another great benefit is the O card. What's the O card, Jacob? The O card is the state-issued official orphan certification document. Though not everywhere takes it, you can get sympathy discounts, fast track for queues, and sometimes free meals out of friends if the delivery is good enough. Another miscellaneous benefit has got to be that I can make some truly horrendous and spine-shuddering jokes that deliver a deafening silence to a room full of heads and hands in which the general consensus is one of pity and awkwardness as I beam with an evil grin. It's a superpower and I love it. And lastly, it taught me all the domestics. I'm a pretty decent cook, I wash all my clothes, pay all my bills, my house is in order, and had they not fucked off, I would have never needed to get good at any of these things. Now in this 8th point, I'm going to describe some of the financial benefits to losing one's parents, but obviously it's very personal to my circumstances. Now I will say, had I been Oliver Twist rather than Bruce Wayne in terms of finances, I imagine my reaction would be slightly different. I was left a small fortune, as described by my mum, but not having been informed of what that was, nor the value of money, nor how much I had until I had nothing left, since I believed the primary earners of my family were no longer earning, it was a matter of a year or two until I was completely broke, or so I thought. Therefore, I cut back spending like the Conservatives in 2010, eat your heart out, David, and I would turn off the heating in my house and exclusively have cold showers. I also engaged in varying ventures to better my finances, and despite all round the bills being paid for, I tried to be as self-sufficient as possible at an age of 15, 16. I was scared into absolute financial insecurity that I learnt everything finance and economics, so that I would never fall victim to ever uttering the words, "Please sir, can I have some more?" It was only until I was about 20 that I figured out my brother and I's burn rate given the amount we had, and realised that my austerity measures, aka self-inflicted hypothermia, was entirely unnecessary. We were left our family home in London and some assets outside of that. I had a net worth on par with most comfortable middle-class people in their middle age. Yes, I am incredibly privileged, but I realised that this was the golden ticket for the riches that I'd always wished for. Yes, at the end of it all, I got a decent inheritance, but instead of jumping to envy, ask yourself, would you trade your parents at the age of 15 for your family home and enough money to live a basic lifestyle for maybe 10 years? Now in this 9th point, though I make all these points and arguments as to why my parents' death benefited me so greatly, I do not think that the genetic component that played a role in my response should be discounted. My brother and I, though he 4 years older, have had quite different responses to our bereavements. I, your happy-go-lucky kind of laid-back guy, has took it in my stride and has perhaps turned it into a positive, whereas my brother has had the response of one of more of a, maybe, victim and is yet to fully get over the injustice. Therefore, I learnt that 2 individuals who are relatively comparable can experience the same stimulus, in our case losing our parents, but respond differently. So as much as I'd like to take full credit, there is an uncontrollable element in one's response. A few years ago, I went to go meet a family friend, an older gentleman in his 50s, for a coffee, and he intermittently revealed to me in between bursts of weeping that it was the 20-odd year anniversary of his mother's death, and as hard as he tried, he still hadn't gotten over it. I will make further videos on the downsides of grief and the strategies and mindsets that helped me overcome my loss. But I will say that my view is generally a rare one. Though I make these admissions, if you are struggling, this is not permission to be discouraged and abdicate your responsibility to yourself. As you might have gathered, I like to consider myself the antithesis of victimhood, and this experience of losing my parents has had, only after a while, a wholly positive effect. Irrespective of my #daddy and mummy issues, instead of sympathy, I wouldn't blame you if you felt jealous or envious of my position. I have a breadth of skills that are unparalleled to most people my age, and had they not popped their clogs and abruptly abandoned me, I would hate to think of the big old fat bitch I would be. In relative terms, I have come a long way from where I used to be, and like Martin Lewis, I can only credit all my prior and future success to the loss of my parents, as I doubt there would or will be another experience that will remind me of my mortality and the pressing need to live a great life. And now it's time to wrap it all up, people. If you got this far, well fucking done. I'm proud of you. I hope that, despite some of my crass remarks, some of the points and arguments that I've made has shown you that losing someone you love doesn't have to be the worst thing that ever happened to you. Whether you're a full-blown Oliver Twist, or perhaps a half-baked orphan, or even not at all, I hope you like this video and have at least one thing to take away with you. This all being said, of course, sometimes I'd like to be mothered. I'd like to pick up the phone and listen to their voices, but I don't get that privilege, and I can assure you, it ain't a right to have a life free from catastrophe. Thank you all for watching. I wish you the best on your journeys, and I'd be more than happy to hear your thoughts and experiences down below.